What is up, YouTube? If you clicked on the video, this is probably the hugest, biggest balance adjustment that we've seen in a long ass time. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm not going to waste too much time. We're going to jump straight into it. Okay, this is the list of the characters that we're going to be seeing change. Specimen says Sage Ball and Sazan, Conqueror Lilias, Lionheart Cermia, C Pavel, MLK TML, Festive Ida, Flan, Summer Break Charlotte, Mui, Lilibet, Sharun, Dom, and Inferno Khawazu. Okay, now all these changes are subject to be changed, obviously, before the update comes out, as they do hold that right, but we haven't really seen that ever. Let's talk about Spez. So Spez, his S1 gains 50% more effectiveness on an S1. So you have higher chances of actually stunning on an S1, which is, it's nice, right? He doesn't have any built-in effectiveness, and he needs to be built all DPS. So having that extra 50% is actually quite nice to land on, maybe just like a 100 res unit or just any tanks or anything like that. Now, what we need to really focus on here is this S2. This S2 has an 80% chance to inflict stun for one turn, attack buff, and increases combat readiness by 50%. So if he has something like Swift Boots, he can take a turn immediately. So aim at power is even higher now, right? And his S3 remains the same, but the included effectiveness in his kit is very nice. But with the extra 50% combat readiness, very problematic unit, okay? Now, Sage Ball and Sazan. This is huge. Sage Ball Sazan used to be one of the premier anti-cleave units in the game. And I'm going to really pull... that's not the right account. But for Sage Ball and Sazan, it's really hard to build him like high ER, and a lot of his damage on S3 is based on the lost health that he had suffered. Terrible. It's terrible, right? Because you can only S3 near the end of a game, whereas now you can build them on like double HP set on a really high speed build, and you can now dispel 2 buffs, right? He used to not be good into Ran because Ran had basically 2 buffs. Obviously, if you're buff stacked with so many buffs in the game now, prot set, immunity, anti-crit, stealth, so on and so forth, dispelling 2 buffs is actually huge at using him as an anti-cleave unit. And then his S3 now is going to be proportional to his maximum health instead of his lost health, which is just a massive change. So we're definitely going to see him come back in some form of an anti-cleave for sure. Now, Conqueror Lilias, it was not on my bingo card to see Conqueror Lilias get buffed in 2025, okay? With all these Vigor units coming out, ARAM, Argent Waves Hua Young, New Kid Aiden. I mean, I guess it was only time. The Vigor Queen herself is back. And so her S3 now is going to grant Vigor to all allies while increasing combat readiness by 15%. So in case you don't really know what that looks like, okay, let's say you have a unit that's 280 speed paired with a Conqueror Lilias. You're looking at a 329 speed from 280 with a 15% combat readiness boost. That is massive. She is so back. Now, her top speed doesn't really change, but all the players that have really high speed, you're going to be able to benefit really bigly by that. But also, they are removing the combat readiness pushback on her S2 and giving her a defense break instead. Okay, a defense break is pretty big. The soul burn remains the same, where you're extending the defense break and the provoke by 2 turns, right? But, I mean, that's crazy. Defense break, and you get a CR push, and you're basically getting attack buff for the whole team and CR push. Like, dude, that's crazy. We're going to see a lot of Conqueror Lilias for sure. Now, Lionheart Cermia, an amazing change. We're changing her constellation from Pisces to Aries, so she is going to get a little bit more stats. She's going to be getting her increased defense as per normal, but instead of increased ER, she's getting immunity. She's getting immunity, dude, and a 50% combat readiness boost. This is insane. Like, when you want to use her as a cleaver, you have to have her at 260 speed, right? But it's hard to have really high defense and damage while having that high of speed. You need really whale gear. Now you get a 50% combat readiness. That means you only need to build her around like 170, 180 speed, right? And that means she'll be good in standard matchups where Harsetti might be in play and in matches where maybe you're trying to play cleave, right? That's an amazing change, and that immunity is awesome because more often than not, sometimes they'll proc a counter or they'll proc a dual attack, and then they can CC lock you after, right? No longer a problem with that immunity, so that's a crazy change for Lionheart Cermia. Now, C Pavel, the main thing you want to take away is his S2 no longer is going to be a 50% combat readiness boost. It is now going to be 100%. 100%. that means you can put even less speed on him and increase the damage. We're gonna start seeing like triple torrent, Commander Pavel, Destro Torrent Pavel on just full damage, no speed subs. He's gonna just nuke stuff off the face of the earth, and all of his damage is getting increased. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind: he is a resource unit with Fighting Spirit, so Elvira, Sea Phantom Politis are still going to be the bane of his existence, but this is still a huge change overall. Now, Twisted Eidolon Kharon. I cannot believe it. We're seeing another buff for Kharon. S1 now inflicts 10% injuries. Okay. S2, once he hits 100 Fighting Spirit, he dispels all debuffs, so he cannot get CC locked when he hits that 100 Fighting Spirit, which is huge. It is huge. Okay. Now, he is going to be able to now inflict the fixed damage regardless of if it hits or not. So one of the weaknesses of Kharon is so many characters have, evasion, and you can't really pick him in some of these squishier units, for example, like New Kid Aiden, right? Now you don't even care. You're going to get a guaranteed 15k fixed damage there, even if you miss. That is huge. Not only New Kid Aiden, think Lone Wolf Payra. Think about if you're fighting against her and she has Rampage, 20% evasion for all the dark units. This is no longer a problem. That is massive. And obviously the 30% damage reduction is huge, but mainly the fact that this will hit no matter if it's a successful attack or not. Huge change. Huge change. This is crazy. I'm so excited for E7 now. I'm so excited. Okay. TML. Now, her S1 with the extra attack is no longer just on her own turn. It is going to be effective on basically any time, right? So if Conqueror Lilias drags her or a 3% dual attack comes in, you're going to have an extra 40% chance to grant an extra attack, not just on her own turn. So that's very good overall. And she now gets defense penetration by 50% if her speed is at least twice of the target. So I don't know if this is gonna let us see a lot more playability from her now. Maybe we might see some really like high TML cleaves again potentially, but I think not, just because of like Boss Ruinka, Renak, these characters still exist. So overall, it's a good change. I don't know if we'll bring her back to the meta though. Now, Festive Ida. I mean, a lot of changes coming in. Let me break it down. Okay, S1 instead of decreased hit chance, you get stunned. Okay, the S2, her strip with the dispel of 2 buffs used to be paired with her S2, reliant on whether or not she gets revealed or not, because she has stealth, right, with the shyness buff. Now it's no longer. They're moving her dispel onto her S3, and then it will decrease defense for 2 turns and a 100% chance to inflict silence for 1 turn. That is huge. And guess what? Ignores effect resistance. Ignores effect resistance. Okay, that is insane. Now, I must say, this unit, she is now able to be reset, right? Before she was you can't get reset by like Requiem Roana or units like that. Now she can, but her kit is a little bit different now. So overall, I think it's a very interesting change. I think it's still going to be a lot of debuffs, so units like Designer Lilibet are still going to shine very, very strongly. But I don't think she'll see that much play. But when the patch comes out, we'll test it for sure. All the Legend players will, and we can kind of report back to you. Now, for the Flan, another huge change, man. It's just huge change after huge change after huge change. S1 dispels 1 buff right now, currently, right? Her new S1 decreases defense for 1 turn. And now her S3, instead of just, decreasing combat readiness and, whatever, increases skill cooldown of all enemies by 1 turn and defense break. Dude! Like, that is crazy. That is crazy. That is craziness, okay? The only, unit that we really have has a defense break like this and a skill cooldown reset is let's say, for example, Knockwall on Elegite Candle. That's it, right? Now this is going to be increased skill cooldown by 1 turn and decreased defense while pushing you back 15%. So that just means, what does that mean? That means immunity set is going to be at an all-time high. We all need immunity on all of our units, because when these new characters come in, it's going to be really problematic, man. And she's a ranger. She can be guiding light. You can use her, dude, insane. I'm not even over exaggerating. This is insane. This is a really packed kit, man. Reset, death break, pushback. That's just unreal. And obviously her EE is going to get changed a little bit, right? The defense break is going to increase up by 10%, which makes total sense. You can exchange for it. Now, Summer Break Charlotte, another change. Damage increase is overall very good, right? One of the problems with Summer Break Charlotte is that she just doesn't do enough damage, right? She just really doesn't do enough damage on S3. She doesn't kill on S1. I think her playability is still not going to go up. As a cleave, bridge, she's still not that common. And especially for some Harsetti players where maybe a team is very squishy, Harsetti can go for that S1 and then Summer Break Charlotte can just follow up and then dual attack, right? But her S1 doesn't increase her damage. It does increase the combat readiness of all allies by 20%, so we might start seeing her get a little bit more play actually, for cleavers especially if they have Harsetti obviously can't give her combat readiness, but if you have a very fast unit like a Ran, like a Lomo Peyra, like a Zio, right, S1, everyone gets 20% combat readiness, and then you can bridge the entire team, right? So we might start seeing Summer Break Charlotte again. If you are a Zio player, you got to have this shit geared because she's coming around. Now, Lilibet, a lot of changes. I think they're trying to change a lot of the RGB characters, which I'm here for. I'm honestly here for. Okay, now her S1 is no longer going to apply an unbuffable. It is now going to increase combat readiness by 20%, and also it will increase the damage. Okay, now on her S2, she will no longer be inflicting bleeds and increasing combat readiness by 50%. She will now be dispelling all buffs. Sorry, let me say that again. She will dispel all buffs, and on the Awakening, a critical hit will grant an extra turn, so she can dispel all buffs into damage. And it's only a 10 soul burn for ignore ER, not 20. So guess what? Lilibet's a warrior, right? What about Thorn of the Blue Rose? Right? There's so many artifacts now that generate souls, right? There's Frida's, there's books, there's just so many ways to gain souls now. The 10 soul burn is huge, right? Dispelling all buffs. You're probably gonna want to have this geared for maybe some kind of like ER players or like some buff stack heavy teams. A lot of units to test so far, and she has penetration on her defense now, which is massive. Again, damage dealt increased. Now, I think her playability will definitely go up. In terms of in the meta in High Legend, I don't know, just because she is a pretty slow character, but definitely worth exploring, especially on like my new account, for example. But we'll test her as well. Now, Mui, oh god, it's just banger after banger. It's just banger after banger. S1, target for 2 turns, moves to target for 1 turn, but it's 100% instead of 75. Okay, for her S1. Now, Grand Finale increases combat readiness to caster by 30% per critical hit. So obviously think of it like Faithless Litica, right? You want to have her on like a crit necklace, right? You are going to want to, she's now gaining 30% over 25. So it's a very, very minor tweak. But I still don't think this is going to make her playable, right? She's still too slow to the newer openers. So I think this is kind of just, a QOL change, but it won't really make, that big of a difference. Now Sharun, 100% chance to inflict venom instead of 75, which is good. More consistency. That Soulburn S1 increases skill cooldown. Very good versus Amiki. Very good. If you haven't had that many good standard options into Amiki, this is one very good one because of the buffs that she has, and Soulburn S1 is now going to reset, which is very strong. Now, for her S2, she will be gaining 25% combat readiness instead of 20, which is huge. And now, at the end of her turn, she's going to increase the combat readiness of the ally with the highest attack by 25%. 25%. Let me put that in perspective for you, okay? Let me put that in perspective for you. So, 25%, let's say you have a unit that's 250 speed. You're getting 25 CR. That's 333 speed. She can enable a lot of units. Even, let's say, not 250. Let's say you go 230, right? 25% push, that's over 300. That's over 300. This is going to be an amazing change, honestly. And she's going to be getting the Venom effects, 2 Venom effects for 2 turns instead of just 1. So, again, if you're using this into, like, some kind of, like, tank down teams or, like, a lot of knights are involved, you get so much control here, right? 2 Venom effects. Imagine if you have, like, a DDR, right? All the Venom, the decreased speed for tempo, the increased combat readiness by 50%. It's going to make her a really, really problematic unit, especially with the fact that her soul burn's only 10% for resetting. So very, very good control unit. Again, her base speed is also not that great. So I can't really predict what the build's gonna be, but I'm thinking maybe like 230, 250 speed with really high effectiveness and bulk. Now, for the Moonlight Fours, okay, Dom is going to be receiving a little tweak. She's going to be gaining, instead of 20% per critical hit, it will be 25%. So a minor change to help her bridge a little bit better. Not bad, not bad overall. And now, instead of her EE, which is basically increasing her combat readiness gain from 20 to 25, which is what it is currently, it will now be increases attack to all allies when using S3. So overall, a pretty decent bridge that we might see some play, but again, right, it's going to be, she has to press S3. It's a non-attack skill. There's a lot of characters that can punish that. And with A rank coming out, obviously a character that you would pair with CDOM that has like AoE crit is Litica, right? So again, I don't know how impactful this will be, but we'll have to test her and see because her damage remains the same and everything in the game is really, really tanky now. So I don't know if we'll see that much play from her. But overall, again, this is a very nice quality of life change from Smilegate. Now, Inferno Khawazu, this is going to be a really interesting one. Obviously, when the caster is granted Vigor, the current S1, right? When he has Vigor, it increases the effect chance from 75 to 100 and it inflicts an additional burn effect. Now, when he has Vigor, he inflicts burn for 1 turn, but it ignores effect resistance. So you think about Conqueror Lilias getting buffed with the Vigor, right? Inferno Khawazu now gets even more value because he ignores ER. Right, one of the issues is when you're fighting against, some tankier, some meta teams like Shu, it might be on an ER build. Like Arunka, it might have like 100 ER base or 150 ER for Flan, right? You think of ML Aria, right? ML Aria obviously is going to be really annoying as well. This just gives him a little bit more consistency on his S1, and the fact that he's able to get an additional burn is amazing, right? It increases his damage by a lot because when you have Vigor and Attack buff, for example, if you're in Benny Marutachi, those burns really, really stack up, especially when you are, hitting into these units that maybe don't have an FCC that can cut some of that fixed damage down. Maybe they don't have, some kind of mitigation. Or you're picking it into a Harsetti matchup and you're looking to capitalize with the burn damage, it's going to be very, very good. But again, I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of play into him, but normally it really just looks like quality of life changes for ignoring ER and obviously getting an additional burn. So I'm going to hold my judgment for now. I think Inferno Khawazu's spot in the meta will probably still stay the same. But, dude, this is a crazy change. Honestly, hats off to Smilegate, and I will put the link in the description and in the comments if you guys want to read it yourself. But that's it. I broke it all down for you guys and just gave some thoughts about from an RTF perspective, but it's going to be exciting. All the changes are going to be coming out. It looks like August 6th, right? So 15 heroes. I'm excited. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next one. Bye!